is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
Minutes after 11. To recap, the claims today are that people who voted to be like Norway, which is in the single market, definitely voted to leave the single market. The other claim is that... What was the other claim? Oh, yeah. A negotiating tactic involves being able to chop your own arms off if the other side don't give you what you want. I'm going to be a bit more generous on that second one. It seems to me absurd to suggest that we somehow derive strength from threatening to be homeless. But I could be maybe oversimplifying things. Let's find out. Joshua in Coventry thinks that it is a negotiating tactic, that we've somehow surrendered. So what do you think the European Union would have been worried about if no deal was still on the table?
Yeah, so I guess the option of walking away, and if we walked away and we were able to negotiate some trade deals, elsewhere in the world, and we didn't negotiate the same kinds of trade deal with the EU, then their salespeople would be at a disadvantage to salespeople in other countries around the world.
But there'd still be 500 million people in that market and 60 million in ours.
Yeah, it's true, but they don't want to confine their salespeople to just that market. Well,
they don't, do they? They've got 30-odd trade deals with everyone from South Korea to Japan.
Okay, sorry, because we're talking over each other. What were you saying?
Well, the European Union has way more trade deals already with countries outside the European Union than we will have when we leave.
Indeed. Well, we'll have zero when we leave, right? So
yeah.
But the gambit, the idea, what you're punting on, if you think that leaving without a deal is perhaps going to help you, you're punting on the idea that it's taken the EU ages to get the deals it's got, and you think that a country like...
It took the other side the same amount of time
to negotiate a trade deal faster than they do, because we don't have to get agreement from everyone else in the EU.
Unless we're still trading with the EU.
Well, unless we accept... unless we're trading with the EU on the terms of the common market. So
that's the only terms. That's the only terms we can trade with them on.
Well, no, that's not true. So,
it is.
The Canada option is... I mean, certainly there's...
Because I hear a lot about this, and I apologise for asking you this question, because if you can't answer it, it's no embarrassment to you. Liam Fox and David Davis can't answer it either. I just never get to ask them. What in the Canada deal allows them... What are the areas of the Canada trade deal, of CETA, where they're allowed to sell into the European Union not following European Union regulations and legislation?
Oh, so that's the key thing. I'm a Canadian. And
yes.
My dad has a Canadian company, and so he can sell to, for instance, to the US and to the EU. But when selling to the US, he has to... The products that he sends to the US comply with their laws. But it doesn't mean that he's restricted to only producing those kinds of products. He can...
No, but the question was, when he's selling to the EU, does he have to obey the EU laws?
That's right.
Yeah. So when I said that we can't trade with the EU without obeying and observing their legislation, I was describing the reality that your father experiences. You're positing this is the punt. No, I need to. I do understand you, and I just need to clarify. This is the gamble that we would somehow be able, as a manufacturing company, and you just heard in the news where our output and growth is now. We'd have two lines of supply. We could sell to markets that obeyed the European Union regulation, and then we could also sell to markets that had lower levels of regulation. And at the moment, as a European Union member, we struggle to do that.
Such as China.
Yes, I'm with you. And that's the risk.
As you can tell from the fact I'm in Coventry, there's a very good chance I worked in the automotive industry.
Yes, and the automotive industry has been pretty, close to unanimous on the dangers of leaving the single market.
They have been. I think the main problem that we're facing is the uncertainty of it all. So I recognise that's, it's like
I've got to be honest with you, Joshua.
The status quo to continue, right? So that's all the sort of senior managers in my company lined up and said, we're not going to tell you how to vote, but definitely vote Remain.
Yes.
And a lot of people in the company didn't. They voted Leave anyway.
Same in Sunderland, even more so, actually.
Is
it still Ryton, the Peugeot plant at Ryton?
So I was just going to say, I think a lot of these managers, they are oftentimes, particularly my company, and particularly I think in the industry as a whole, they're very conservative people, but not uppercase conservative. They're very risk-averse people, and they've never lived outside of the EU. They've always been inside the EU. I've sort of seen the world outside the EU. I don't think it's so scary. So, I mean, obviously, it would... When I looked at all the options, and I saw that, there's bad case scenarios inside the EU, bad case scenarios outside, and obviously there's very bad case scenarios outside, but I just looked at all the options, weighed up the probabilities, and I thought, I still think it's worth a gambit.
I like you, Joshua. I could talk to you all day. I don't know that we'd ever... You still think it's a good idea? You still think it's worth the gamble?
I have to say, this government in particular, I said, when I weighed it up, I thought the worst case scenario was, Corbyn as the leader. And the second worst case scenario has to be something like this particular government. I'm very disappointed with them. But I will tell you, James, this is the thing. I looked at if I was only going to have, I felt like this is once in a lifetime.
Yes.
If we stay in, we're going to have to track with these guys for another 50 years or so before we get another crack at it.
Yes.
And who knows where they're going to go, the EU, in that time period. And I just thought, I have a young child.
I get this.
Like
this is it. This is for me.
When he first comes to vote, he's going to have more power to influence. So even if Jeremy
he's
Corbyn
not though, and I completely disagree with you, completely and utterly. But I like you, and you and I could have a fruitful debate, couldn't we?
All right. We could.
I just wish we'd done it before the referendum. And also, before you go, I need to just point out the trade theory of gravity. The idea that you replace trade with a market that is you can swim to. You replace that with China.
We wouldn't say just China. I mean, North America.
That's also somewhere you can't swim to.
What do you mean swim to? Oh, you mean swim?
Well, I think that's the trade theory of gravity, isn't it? That you inevitably gravitate towards the markets that are geographically closest to you, and the bigger the product, i.e. a car, the more pertinent that theory becomes.
No, I get that, but the thing is that there's other things to consider, which is like the shipping, for instance, is the main problem. With the trade theory of gravity is based on shipping being the main problem. There's a lot of products that don't get shipped.
Yeah, but we were talking about cars.
Yeah, well, indeed, but in our
what doesn't get shipped? Also, you mean by boat, as opposed to just the process of transporting something?
I was thinking more of like software and stuff like that. Software and services. I guess they're not products, are they?
Yeah, well, no, that's not part of manufacturing either.
Well, it's increasingly a part of manufacturing, actually. If you think
services aren't. Software kind of is. So this would be you'd send it down a wire. You'd send it down a wire rather than over a sea.
We could debate about that. So things are changing in manufacturing towards more of a service model. But anyway, even when it comes to manufacturing, there's other things such as homologation, which is trying to meet regulations and stuff like that. There's other things that add cost in that can balance against the cost of transport, and kind of, but not if you then introduce tariffs as well, of course. So for you, just genuinely, and I promise you that my affection and fondness for talking to you is completely sincere. I sometimes worry that people don't believe me when I'm being nice, because it's so rare. And I accept. I don't fully accept the idea that things could have gone much better and it's all the fault of this government. But I can't prove that any more than you can. So we'll leave that parked. At what point, roughly, would you expect to have enough evidence to reach a conclusion about whether we've done the right thing or the wrong thing? Where are you looking at calendar-wise?
with particular reference to the automotive industry, because I know it very well. It was my father's patch in the Midlands for 20 years. With particular reference to the automotive industry, when would you expect to be able to turn around and say, oops, I made a mistake. Luckily, I can move to Canada. None of these other people can. Or, ha-ha, yes, onwards and upwards.
Right. I suppose it's not like an on-off thing. I think that we're getting more and more clarity as days go on. So obviously, after the Irish border thing gets sorted out, then we have to think about the actual trade deals. Then you'd also have to consider what the trade deals that we can strike elsewhere in the world.
Yes.
I personally would feel like we could get more confidence if the government were working on deals in principle elsewhere.
Yeah.
And if we had some of those lines, I would have, if I had been, what's his name, the Cameron guy, I would have actually worked on that before the referendum.
Not his job, though. I guess that's another kind of historical revisionism. I think we're doing something disastrous, but I'm going to prepare for it, despite the fact that all the people who are persuading the public that it's a brilliant idea aren't doing any preparation whatsoever. Can leave a lot at the door of David Cameron. So you didn't answer my question. 5 years, 10 years? I know it's a bit binary, but go on.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, but roughly.
Okay. I think by 5 years we should certainly have a much better view than we have now. Once the negotiations are all done, I think that we will have a better view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if there was a second referendum now, with this government in charge?
I still would leave because I can return to the other point that I can ditch May, I could ditch Corbyn, or I could contribute to ditching them, but I can't contribute to ditching the other guys in the EU. They're just.
And why did you want to?
Well, first of all, I don't like that they're controlling my country's trade policy, or the country I live in, its trade policy.
But they'll be controlling it if we sign a trade agreement with them. That was the one thing we agreed on first.
They'll only control our trade policy with them.
Yes.
They won't stop us from doing deals with other parts of the world. So one of the things.
So it's all about the deals. And do you know what? If these deals occur, I'll ring you back in Coventry and I'll shake you by the hand. Seriously. If the deals are there that will not only replace but enhance, so we'll end up better than we are now, I will bring a piece of humble pie around to your house and eat it in your kitchen, as long as you promise not to phone the authorities.
I agree. I admit that a lot of my vote hangs on.
I've got to go to the break. I don't want you to feel that you're squeezed, but we're waiting for the deals on, not the unicorns, the trade deals on the horizon that would leave Britain in a stronger economic position than full membership of the biggest single market on the planet provides.
Yeah, and on the other side, we're waiting to see whether or not there's
I've got to go.
bailouts in Europe. Okay, sorry.
I've got to go. And I really did enjoy talking to you, not least because I would describe you as an intelligent leaver, and God knows they're thin on the ground.
This is LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
20 minutes after 11 is the time. Jamie Oliver sitting before the Select Committee at 3:15 this afternoon, along with sundry other academics and experts looking at the government. It's a cross-party obesity strategy. It's actually a really important day, although there are no opportunities to frighten you or encourage you to feel angry, so it won't get the coverage that other issues get. What they've managed to do, and we'll be talking to Jamie about this in about 25 minutes, what they've managed to do is wrestle the issue away from party politics. So if you're serious about health, this is oddly why the idea of taking the whole of the NHS outside of government control is strangely attractive. Because when it becomes a party political plaything, the problems start. So what you had under Blair and Brown and Cameron was a sense that they were listening and there was some movement in the right direction on childhood obesity strategy. And then when Theresa May got in, there was a sense that the ball had been dropped. So what the last 18 months have seen Jamie Oliver and others do is try to knit together a broad coalition of politicians from all parties, including Theresa May's government, so that an obesity strategy can remain in place regardless of who's in Downing Street. And we'll find out in about 25 minutes how optimistic Jamie is that they have managed to do that. A couple of phone lines free. 0345 606 0973 is the number to call. I did enjoy talking to Joshua. A few of you have pointed out there are a couple of things I shouldn't have left unchallenged. I don't know if that's true. I challenge everything people complain, and then I don't challenge enough people complain. Such is life. But yeah, once we've sorted out the Irish border is a statement of uncommon optimism, and the idea that the success of Brexit will hinge upon the trade that we can do with countries other than the European Union in the future. Especially if those countries already have a trade deal with the European Union, it's a little bit unicorny, but it is at least rational, up to a point. So there are still reasons to be cheerful, but you won't know whether they're going to come true for a minimum of 5 years. 22 minutes after 11 is the time. Peter is in Gillingham. Peter, what would you like to say?
Good morning. I phoned early. Do you want to talk about the first issue or the negotiation one?
Take your pick.
Well, I'll pick up your phrase of cognitive dissonance, if I may, James. I'm an amateur psychologist. Actually, I'm a business school tutor, so we know what that means. But in case your listeners don't, it's when your ideas clash with the worldview in your mind, and there's an uncomfortable feeling.
No, I thought it was when you simultaneously believe two contradictory things, like going to church while also being a kind of intellectual atheist.
Yes. Or being lied to doesn't help.
No, we need to be clear on what cognitive dissonance means, because you were quite patronising then to a lot of my listeners, and then you got it wrong.
Well, all right, then get me right.
Okay, it's when you simultaneously hold two contradictory positions.
Yeah, I didn't express it clearly, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, carry on.
And both sides of this debate have experienced cognitive dissonance. The Remainers believe that it was an advisory referendum, as the caller mentioned.
No, I don't.
And they feel.
No, it was in the leaflet that went through all our letterboxes. Technically, it was an advisory referendum, but I think that's kind of hair splitting. The leaflet said the government will deliver whatever the verdict is. So I think the advisory thing is a red herring. I don't actually know anyone who would argue that passionately.
Well, I would, because referendums that are binding are normally 65, 66%. We didn't do that.
Yeah, but I don't think anyone voted thinking it was just advisory. I think everybody on either side both thought this result, and I agree with you that the gap should have been bigger for it to be more meaningful. But I think that's a red herring to say that there's cognitive dissonance about it being advisory.
All right. Well, so they feel a little let down, and yes, you're right. They probably did know for the most part that was going to happen.
Not even for the most part. I don't think anybody who voted to remain thinks it shouldn't happen because it didn't really mean anything, that vote. I think that's a really silly suggestion, mate, with respect.
Oh, well, I'll accept that.
Yeah.
We'll agree to disagree on that. But the legal...
Well, hang on. I hate agreeing to disagree when the person who's agreeing to disagree doesn't understand what it is they're agreeing to disagree about. You're seriously claiming that a significant proportion of people who voted to remain didn't think that a vote to leave would mean anything?
I think a lot of people who voted for Remain read all the literature that's buried away in the government, and they do know that it was an advisory referendum.
But the literature categorically stated that they would deliver according to the result.
Well, the literature coming through the door.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. So I think there are not a significant proportion. A proportion of people still believe it was an opinion poll.
Oh, well, okay, we can agree to disagree about that.
Yeah. All right.
It wasn't an opinion poll.
Yeah, the Leavers are the worst kind of winners, it seems.
We can definitely agree about that.
I myself have been punched by a Leaver for doing what you do on a daily basis. And I've been working with 30 EU citizens, one of whom has been threatened with being set alight. And I was in a pub talking to a Leaver the other night, and I said, do you think it's fair to set people alight because their views disagree with yours? And they said, well, and I explained this.
Oh, we can't use them as. I mean, I appreciate but we can't use them as an example of the whole. Even I wouldn't do that, mate. I mean, I'm not suggesting you deserve to get punched, but if you're telling all Leavers that they approve of setting fire to foreigners,
not all Leavers.
No,
I'm using a specific example.
All right.
But I myself have, argued vigorously to try and get to some resolution of this.
Yeah.
Sometimes, if conversation doesn't happen, then other means are used. So I've been working with these 30 citizens, and they've had all sorts done because people won't talk, which is what you do so well.
Well, I think there's plenty of people who want to punch me, mate.
Well, I don't right now, and I can't.
We're not going to agree to disagree about that, are we?
No.
Go on.
We're never going to get over this unless we realise that the people who did it to us on both sides are actually need to take responsibility. We need to start fighting amongst ourselves, which is what they have us doing. And I was so impassioned. I'm afraid I'm a Remainer, James. I'm sorry, it's not who you want to hear from on the show, maybe.
And a bit of variety is the spice of life, Peter.
But
I probably, if I realised that in advance, I wouldn't have duffed you up so much on the cognitive dissonance thing.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, it's going to be a love fest in a minute, isn't it?
Carry on.
But, I do see some of the levers' points. And I actually think we were all lied to.
Yeah.
But we won't solve this by fighting amongst ourselves. And these EU citizens are so driven that they've written a song called In Limbo, which is in the charts in Amazon this week.
I shall dig it out. I shall have a look at it. And that's your concern, is the people who have had... Because we can talk about... And much as I liked Joshua in Coventry, the notion of sitting and waiting to see if things turn out all right is particularly hard for... Not just businesses, but in your case, individuals who've had their future turned upside down. Daniel Hannan it was, who insisted that EU citizens would not have their rights affected in any way, and yet they still don't know what their future holds.
Exactly. So David Davis and Mr. Fox must have read
Dr.
the Penguin
Fox.
book of... No, Dr. Fox, sorry. Is he a real doctor?
I don't, yes,
Of course he is.
no, he is a real doctor, mate. He's qualified to look at your bunions, but possibly not to do trade deals.
Instead of reading Sun Tzu and other books, they read the Penguin Book of Negotiations. There's a thing in negotiation called a BATNA, the best alternative to a negotiated answer. And it works in a car showroom. When you buy a car and the price is too much, you walk out.
Yes.
That's fine. It does not work in a complex, globally connected world where you'll still have to deal with the bloody car showroom
Exactly.
the following day.
Or you take your old car to the scrap heap without knowing how you're going to get home, and then you start cheering as the crusher comes down and smashes the old car to smithereens because it's the will of the people and we've taken back the power, but we don't know how we're going to get home now because we just smashed up the old car.
And, I know facts are inconvenient, but this whole thing of global trade, we do trade, obviously, around the world already. We pretty well saturated that trade. I was at the Commonwealth thing last week, chasing Theresa May around the town. And if this whole fact that you've used a few times, if you double the distance, you halve the trade. It's a logarithmic law, but it's not a mathematical law, but it's one of those unfortunate things.
Yeah.
You can't just shift with a white paper.
Because it's counting. It's not a matter of opinion. And you count the amount of miles you have to transport something. The attraction of doing that deal diminishes according to how far away it is. Although Joshua pointed out that software wouldn't necessarily... Well, software definitely wouldn't fall under that anymore. I'm not sure that's enough to make up for the damage it might do to his own industry, automotive. Peter, thank you, mate. Thank you for indulging my sore head at the beginning of the call. It's 11:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC.